Weep, Granagh, weep, Nini, Bong! Welcome back, Autobuddies and Decepticons, to Transformers AutoBook Club, a weekly video and podcast series where we read and deep dive into one issue or story per week from Marvel's Transformers comics. As always at the start of the show, I'll cover some Transformers news from the week first. There were a couple of things this week that caught my attention. Firstly, a company called Special Edition Music, from their website, specialeditionmusic.com, are reissuing two Vince DiCola Transformers the Movie albums that were previously BotCon exclusives that you couldn't get anymore. So they've been repressed. The first batches of orders got signed copies of the CDs from Vince, but those are all gone now. So if you do catch it now, you can still get a copy of the CD, which is a limited edition repress, but it won't be signed by him. Either way though, it's super cool they've reissued Artistic Transformations and the Protoform Sessions by Vince DiCola. Personally, I'm a big music fan, I'm a huge music lover, so I had to order those as soon as I found out about this. And the other thing I found was not really announced with any fanfare, and I actually found this thanks to the Transformers subreddit. There's a book coming in October about the Transformers animated movie. It's already listed on Amazon, so I'll read what the blurb says. Groundbreaking at the time of its release, 40 years ago, Transformers the movie was a turning point for the franchise. This stunning art book will give fans a way to treasure their memories forever. In 1986, Transformers the movie changed the course of the Transformers franchise forever. Released just 2 years after the popular Saturday morning cartoon made its debut, the animated feature film took the saga in a startling new direction that thrilled and shocked young fans in equal measure. Yeah, I think lots of people can agree with that. Featuring an intense storyline in which several key characters met their demise, including heroic Autobot leader Optimus Prime, the film blended an electrifying story with sumptuous visuals to create an adventure that would become a pop culture phenomenon and the blueprint for future Transformers storytelling. 40 years after its release, Transformers the Movie, The Ultimate Visual History, will take an in-depth look at the creation of the film and the impact of its ongoing legacy. Told through interviews with key creatives, including story consultant Flint Dill, the book will explore the journey that brought Transformers to the big screen, and the decisions that took the feature film in a bold new direction. From casting legends of the screen, including Orson Welles and Leonard Nimoy, to commissioning the film's riotous heavy metal soundtrack, each aspect of the production will be explored with unique insights from a range of experts. Central to the film's legend is its eye-popping visuals, with beautifully rendered vistas, imaginatively conceived characters, and scenes of glorious, no-holds-barred destruction. Illustrated with concept art, storyboards, and other visuals, this deluxe book will showcase the incredible design work that went into the film, bringing together a dazzling wealth of never-before-published imagery. Also featuring sections on the film's music, its influence on subsequent Transformers stories, from comics to feature films, and the ongoing toy lines it has inspired. Transformers the Movie, The Ultimate Visual History, is a must-have purchase for the film's legions of fans. It sounds pretty interesting, I really want to see that for myself. I'm really curious to see all the storyboards and all that kind of stuff, and of course, I'll be happy to hear any stories there are about the soundtrack, because it's so awesome. That's all the Transformers news I've got for you this week. So let's roll on to our issue for today. Today's story is called Crisis of Command. It's a 3-part story from the UK comics. And I decided to shove it all into one episode because I think splitting up a 3-part story just doesn't really work well. Let's transform and roll into it. So we've got the cover image here. This is the image from the Till All Are One compendium that I have coming to me in the mail, hopefully in the next few weeks. But it's only one cover, and I think these stories are split across multiple issues, but they've given us one. So this is the one that I've got. I can't really tell what's going on here. It looks like Ravage is bursting through a poster of the Autobots standing around an entrance to the Ark. That doesn't really make any sense, though. So maybe it's some, white lightning effect around him? I'm not sure what it's supposed to be. So he's in the foreground, kind of leaping out or leaping toward us. And then behind him there's Prime, Mirage, Prowl, and Jazz. And they're all aiming forward, so I guess they can see Ravage. Looks like they're aiming at him. And the text at the bottom there says, Ravage's resolution, anarchy in the Ark. The first shot is an external view of the Ark, and the narration tells us that 4 million years ago, it brought 2 warring factions, Autobots and Decepticons, crashing to Earth. And now, once again, it plays host to conflict. Though this time, it's Autobot against Autobot. Jazz and Prowl are arguing in the center of a throng of Autobots, with Prime sitting some distance behind on a big yellow chair, watching each make their case. Prowl says that Optimus should use the Matrix of Creation to wipe out the currently leaderless Decepticons while they have the chance. Jazz argues that language like wipe out is Decepticon thinking, and that the Autobots cannot stop following that path, which I agree with him there. There is a non-lethal middle way here, especially considering that the Matrix should give Optimus the power to totally dismantle the Decepticons with a mere thought, which will not kill them, but will completely disable them. Buster did just that to Jetfire, and Bumblebee told him that the Matrix does bestow that power to its holder, though we guessed at the time that we never see Prime actually using that ability, and this is kind of a testament to that. I guess, it's too convenient, so he can't have that power all the time. So while canonically, yes, that option should be there, for the sake of the story going forward, it's a safe bet that, that's just never going to happen, or probably be mentioned again. Ratchet pleads with Prime for guidance, calling his name twice, so it seems like Prime is kind of silently watching all this without weighing in. The credits are down here at the bottom. Mike Collins is on script, Jeff Sr. on art, Steve Whitaker on colors, Mike Scott on letters, and the editor was Ian Rimmer. Ratchet doesn't let up when Optimus doesn't reply though. He tries to push Optimus to say something. Everyone is waiting, and some kind of decision needs to be made on the issue. He calls again, Optimus? Once more, he begins but Optimus turns to him, and the coloring and the shape of his face are all kind of messed up here. But it actually serves the story, right at this moment anyway. It's the scariest I've ever seen Prime look. The panel behind him is green, with dramatic lines surrounding his head. He looks absolutely furious. He doesn't appear to raise his voice though. He's just shooting Ratchet the most withering look I've ever seen, and says, I am not a warrior by choice. I want this conflict ended. From the next panel, it looks like Prime might really be angry with Prowl, because he stands up now, and one of his fists is raised, and the other hand is pointing a finger at Prowl. He says that the sacred Autobot creation matrix is in his mind. It's the means of Autobot generation. As in creation. It's in the name, right? Does Prowl, and those siding with him in this heated debate, want to see Prime use it for destruction? Which, if you look at it literally, is the antithesis of its purpose. I can kind of see why even the suggestion is heretical. Next, we get a panel of what looks like an entryway to the Ark that's sitting open, though there's nobody there. It took me a second. This comes off a bit strangely here, but it makes more sense in just a second. Prowl doesn't directly answer Prime's question, though. He fights back that if Prime just does as he suggests, then the war will be over in a matter of days. Which is not what Prime's saying, really. Prowl's kind of missing the point here, I feel. Nevertheless, Prime asks him to explain further. Prowl says that they could build themselves an army of Autobots specifically designed for combat. Pretty much Shockwave's idea, so Jazz was right. Prowl really is using a Decepticon mindset here. Behind him is his imagined image of what such an Autobot would look like. Dark blue and red, with yellow horn-like head fins, and a very plain robotic kind of face, unlike most of the Autobots who have more kind of human-looking faces. In his imagination, the army of gigantic ultimate Autobots decimate the Decepticons in, quote, one dramatic stroke. And there's an image of one shooting a laser directly through a kind of generic Decepticon. Then Optimus would have the piece he's aiming for. Jazz puts aside objections about morality and the Matrix for now, and changes tack. Even if they did create this army, what would they use for fuel? The Autobots barely have enough for themselves now as it is. Prime interrupts their bickering. He's heard enough. And then that strange shot of the doorway earlier comes into context. Ravager's shadow falls across a wall. They've been infiltrated. Prime unilaterally decides that the creation matrix won't be used for destruction. He says he won't allow it to be perverted, and he asks Prowl if he even realizes what it is he's suggesting. What about Earth? The destruction caused by Prowl's idea would be cataclysmic. Protecting humans is what separates the Autobots from the Decepticons. If they stoop to the level of warmongering, the Autobots will be no better than they are. There will be no ultimate Autobots. This discussion is closed. Prime is putting a finger there in that panel, and in the next one, everyone is starting to filter out through the doorway, talking amongst themselves about what they just saw. Someone thinks that Prowl's idea had merit. They realistically could wipe out the Decepticons using the Matrix. Another says Optimus is being too pessimistic about what would happen, and that perhaps he's still not fully himself, after all the craziness of being decapitated, held hostage, and made to watch Shockwave almost wipe out the Autobots and kill Buster, and not to mention the message that the Decepticons sent to Cybertron, the content and outcome of which we are still yet to find out. A disembodied thought bubble says, how interesting, tipping us off that Ravage has heard all of this. Prime sits in his yellow chair, now alone, with an arm hanging limp and his head down. The narration is really nice here. It says, alone again, but solitude is invaded by obligations and crushed by the weight of responsibilities. Isn't that all part and parcel of being a leader? But as a leader, even after he had spoken, he heard the Autobots opposing his edicts. Prime questions if that's ever happened before his and the Autobots' crushing defeat at the hands of Shockwave. Before Prime had his head basically mounted to a wall and his mind scoured for the secrets of the Matrix. Before his body was used by a fake Optimus Prime head programmed by Shockwave to take out the Autobots, who are his friends and his allies, whose trust in him almost cost them their lives. And, it says, they made him leader again. There was no question in anyone's mind, except Optimus Prime's. Was he really fit to rule again? And were they starting to doubt that themselves? This is a really nicely written page, condensing the craziness of the past few US issues into a distillation of what we really already knew. All the things that Shockwave did were torturous for Prime, who, all throughout them, commented on how powerless he felt, and how all he could do in his bodiless state was just to accept responsibility as the Autobot leader. Shockwave messed with his mind, like actually physically, when he was trying to get the Matrix, but he also figuratively messed with his mind too by having Prime witness all of his machinations. And on top of all that, his body was also violated, and he had to sit by, powerless, knowing that his very own body might well have killed his friends. When you stop to think about that, and have all these facts together in one page like this, it's really harrowing. Like, every part of him has been used in some way or violated. It's a testament to Prime's fortitude that he wasn't driven mad or into like a swirling vortex of depression. We're several steps back from that point, I think. Prime is, clearly really affected, but I don't think like a Prime depression arc would have performed well with the kids, as interesting as that would be for me and my adult mind. Instead, we're getting a lighter and more easily understood by kids version of pretty much the same thing, just a bit less dramatic and a bit less severe. Prime doubts his ability as a leader, and he sees that his most precious and loyal allies are also questioning his leadership, and that has opened a cavernous void of self-doubt for Prime. And there's something really beautiful there too, that after all those things that he went through, after all that, the thing that really sent him spiraling, like opened up this depression for him, was seeing his most loyal friends question him. I think that's really amazing. I don't know if that's intentional or if that's how just my read on it, but yeah, that's really heavy. Ravage is watching all of this, and though he can't hear Prime's internal thoughts on the matter, you don't really need to see the kind of headspace he's in from his solitude and his body language. Ravage, who is still at least thinking in words, unlike Laserbeak, who has recently been allowed only to squawk, and that's all, he says that it's fascinating to see Prime dealing with discontent in the Autobots. Prime, unaware of Ravage, who, remember, is invisible when he's in shadow, like he's a rogue from World of Warcraft or something, he thinks to himself that perhaps Prowl was right. A sudden, large-scale attack would put a swift end to the war, but would they be able to minimize the potential danger to any humans? Ravage thinks to himself that he should take note of all this, and begins to slink away, staying hidden in the shadows around the Ark. The narration says that Ravage is able to sense traps, but right now, he's undetectable and in a blind spot. Very close to him is where the shadow is broken by the light, and he knows that stepping into it would trigger sensors and alarms, alerting everyone to his presence. So he sticks a paw out, and so all that explanation served to show us that that was fully intentional. An alarm blares and he leaps in front of Prime, who yells, "Who? Ravage?" And then there's a commotion as several other Autobots try to stop Ravage, firing on him and missing, while Ravage pounces and leaps and knocks them all over. The text box says that although the Autobots argued before, now they go into action together, and there's an image of Jazz and Prowl standing together, firing at Ravage, who one of them manages to hit on the hindquarters. Ravage growls and crouches. Someone says, "Watch out, he's turning!" Someone else says, "Missile attack!" And Ravage fires quite a hefty-looking missile, which explodes in the midst of the crowd of Autobots and knocks them all back. This missile makes no sense, actually. Lasers is kind of fine, right? But Ravage spends a lot of his time as a cassette. Where is this thing going then? And then the rest of the time he's just carrying it around inside his body somewhere? Doesn't that seems a bit dangerous, right? If he gets any kind of bump or knock. Transform and roll with it, right? Ironhide says that Ravage has wiped out their front line, and Jazz says, "Come on, after him." He transforms and drives after Ravage through the maze of corridors in the Ark, as Ravage heads for the outside. With a final leap, Ravage makes it out, but he knows the Autobots won't be far behind, and some of them are faster than he is, so he starts to look for some shadows to hide himself in. Mirage is there, and at first it looks like he doesn't see him. But then Ravage is spotted by who he thinks is Mirage, who tells Ravage that he's trapped. He aims and fires at him, but someone from off-page says that now, Ravage is defenseless, having spent his missile, which he realizes now passes through Mirage without doing any damage. He realizes that he's been fooled by a hologram, and that the off-page voice belonged to Hound. Hound tells Ravage that the game's up, and Ravage growls before Hound traps him in an energy net, saying, "Chew on this, ugly!" Ravage struggles and growls, but it's no good, and he gets tangled up in the net. Prime arrives and thanks Hound for a job well done. Hound says that some of the credit belongs to Mirage too, for distracting and disarming Ravage. Smiling, they tell Prime that though both of them have had a different idea about how it should be done, they still have a common foe in the Decepticons and want them to be stopped. Prime says, I see. He asks them to lock up Ravage, maximum security, and says, You wish to speak to me, Prowl? Prowl explains that they don't know what Ravage was even looking for, but that he guesses from the timing that now Ravage knows that the Autobots are debating whether or not to use the creation matrix for a strike at the Decepticons. Prime says that they shouldn't be discussing this out in the open, so they go to Prime's private chambers to talk. Which is not really weird, but I never really considered any of them having, like, a room or quarters. I kind of imagine that they all just hung out in, like, the bridge or whatever most of the time. It's not like anyone needs a place to sleep or anything. Prime says they don't know what ears are listening. And then, in the next panel, where we can see Laserbeak perched on a close-by outcropping of rock, Prime says, or what eyes are watching. Elsewhere, the Decepticons have, for some reason, all gathered at their silly old base, Castle Decepticon. A weird choice, considering that they have the oil rig, which has its own power source, and is surrounded on all sides by water. It just seems like a much better place to use, if you ask me, but I'm never going to complain about seeing Castle Decepticon. I love this wacky place. Soundwave tells Thundercracker and Starscream that according to Laserbeak, Ravage has been captured. Starscream says that they were fools to have sent Ravage inside the Ark alone to test the Autobots, and Soundwave argues that Megatron would have made the same call. Which is interesting, given that Shockwave has most recently been their leader and made some very good calls. So, right now it looks like Soundwave will obey whoever is the leader, but his real loyalty lies with Megatron. Ravage knew that he was the best candidate for the job. Starscream's face is really close to Soundwave's in this picture, but quite a way below it. It's as if he's much shorter, or Soundwave has just grabbed and dipped him, and they're about to kiss. I don't know how they got into these positions, because it doesn't look like Starscream is all that much shorter. Whatever happened, Starscream says, Megatron? Megatron has vanished. Starscream says that Megatron must have run away like a coward, but had they put Starscream in charge, the Decepticons would have eliminated the Autobots and forcefully taken the creation matrix from Optimus Prime. Soundwave is clearly sick of Starscream running his mouth, and not for the first time, he has a pretty cool line here. He talks so differently in these comics, and honestly, it's been for the better. He says that this kind of thinking is exactly why Megatron and Shockwave have been leaders, but Starscream will always be nothing but battle fodder. You have no sense of strategy, no subtlety. You are a missile with a mouth, Starscream. Soundwave makes a really good point. The Decepticons themselves use the Matrix to make some super strong robots, so it stands up to reason that the Autobots will have done the same, which they are currently arguing about doing. If they do decide to do that, attacking would just end in them all getting themselves killed. But they'll know one way or the other soon, because Ravage has been sent to spy on the Autobots. Starscream says, how? He's been captured. Soundwave says that no prison can hold Ravage, thanks to his electromagnetic emission shield, which, come on. Sure, it lets him get through this kind of like force field barrier thing in the panel, but it's not going to be much use against, a regular door. So, yeah, the Decepticons took a bit of a gamble there, which paid off conveniently. The Autobots used laser doors, or whatever, and the Decepticons figured that that would be the case, so Ravage would easily be able to escape if captured. Which was always part of the plan, he reveals, though Starscream wasn't filled in about that. Escaping his holding cell, just as planned, Ravage escapes into the night, taking with him all the information he learned from eavesdropping on the Autobots. And that's where part 1 ends, but since this is a 3-part story, let's roll right into Crisis of Command Part 2. Bumblebee drives across the dry, empty desert surrounding Mount St. Hilary. He's going pretty quickly, judging by the trail of dust he's leaving behind. He's jumping a little bit in the picture too, like he's hit a bump or a ramp, and while he's driving he's feeling hopeless. He says he's failed. At what, of course, we don't know yet. The credits are here too. James Hill, who you might remember from last week's episode, is on script. I was highly amused by the bonkers choices and events of Christmas Breaker, but this story is pretty different. I guess, technically it's better, it's not as bad, but it's not better as in I enjoyed it more. I had so much fun last issue. Jeff Sr. returns on art, but Gina Hart is on colors this time, and Mike Scott is back on letters, and Ian Rimmer was the editor. B is kicking up a huge cloud of sand and dust, and he exasperatedly admits that he can't see Ravage anywhere. He's lost him. He transforms into his robot mode, with a fist up, so it looks like he's shaking it, like an old man. He thinks that Ravage could be camouflaging himself anywhere in this desert, which... Can he, though? He needs shadows, right? It's a pretty featureless landscape. He'd be pretty hard-pressed to find much to hide in, I think. B guesses that there's only one thing he can do now, Switch to infrared vision. B. Why now? Why did you not just start off with that? Even if this is for the reader's benefit, like to show us that he can do this, he should have just done that before starting out. I'm just saying. B wants to see if he can pick up Ravage's heat trail, but he doesn't see one. But he does see Ravage, who darts out from behind a boulder. Somehow, even having all night as a head start, on the first page the sun was blazing, but when Ravage left it was specifically stated to be night. So despite that, Ravage only got within a drivable distance of the Ark. We won't dwell on that too long, but wow, Ravage is seriously slacking. B thinks he won't escape me as easily as he escaped the Ark's maximum security cell, which uses only lasers as a door. Ravage isn't the only one slacking. B fills us in that it was only by chance that he even checked the cell and noticed that Ravage had gone, after which he hurried to tell Optimus. But Optimus had other things on his mind at that time. He remembers hearing Optimus speaking to Prowl through the door of his, what Prime himself called, chambers. He says, "An all-out strike, Prowl?" And Prowl says, "Yes! If the Autobots take care of the Decepticons once and for all, then they can focus on repairing the Ark and returning home to Cybertron," which, remember, is hundreds of light years away, and they don't even know its location. Though the Decepticons have sent a transmission there, so answers to those questions might be coming soon. Prime says that Prowl's logic is sound, but something isn't sitting right with him. He begins, maybe if, but realizes that B is there. Somehow. In the next panel, the door is open, so maybe that's how awkward. Trying to eavesdrop outside of an automatic door. And then it just opens in your face. That's a really funny image to me, like the door slowly rising, and B just having to stand there because it's too late to do anything else. He's even looking down at the floor, and he says, "Please forgive my intrusion, Optimus, but Ravage has escaped." Prime whispers, "Escaped? Oh no. Prowl, what should I do?" This is new for Prime. He's usually so decisive, and in the art here he's putting his head in his hands, and the poor guy is really going through it. Prowl suggests that he orders Hound and Mirage to go after Ravage. Since they caught him once before, they can do it again. B awkwardly leaves, and he's shaken by having seen Prime like that. He also doesn't know what to do about the situation, and, in a baffling turn, having heard Prowl's suggestion, decides to just go after Ravage by himself without relaying those orders to the others. I mean, maybe he assumes that since it's Prowl's idea, he'll do it, or that Optimus will do it. But to say nothing to anyone and just leave and go and chase Ravage is such an ill-considered thing to do. This makes B look really stupid at best, and insubordinate at worst. And not to put too fine a point on it, but last issue, in Christmas Breaker, there were baffling choices there too. I don't think James Hill is a bad writer. I think he's a very good writer when it comes to prose. When it comes to comics, this is the second time he's had characters doing things that just don't make sense. So Bumblebee heads outside, running at first and then transforming into car mode, and as he does, he thinks that Optimus has been under so much stress recently. He's not himself, and perhaps he's extra suggestible right now, and would therefore easily be influenced by Prowl's suggestions. He thinks that maybe if he manages to capture Ravage himself, then he'll be able to talk to Prime and make the suggestion of his own, to take a less violent path. Maybe he'll even be able to convince Prime not to use the Matrix to fight the Decepticons. And as he's thinking all this, he starts to catch up to Ravage, who we can see running slightly into the distance. So after Ravage ran off the first time, he just kind of stopped and hung out, but he had a massive head start, and then Bumblebee went back to the Ark, and during the entire time it took for that last scene to play out, after which Ravage knows he's been seen once, he still decides to stop running again. James Hill, come on, man. Like, what? Transform and roll with it. Inside the Ark, Prime is having similar thoughts to Bumblebee. He's doubting himself, and Prowl too, wondering if he's being too easily swayed by Prowl and his ideas. Hound and Mirage arrive, and Prime is surprised and confused to see them. He asks why they're there, and why they're not out searching for Ravage. Hound asks, searching for? And Mirage says that he thought Ravage was in the security cell. Prime explains that Ravage escaped, and Bumblebee was asked to tell the two of them about it, and that they should go and bring Ravage back, which Bumblebee obviously did not do. Hound says that they saw Bumblebee speeding out of the Ark, and he points his finger in the direction he was going. Mirage realizes that Bumblebee must have gone after Ravage by himself, and he literally went past them on the way out. He could have at least asked them to join him, or there's just no need for B to have done this. I guess he feels responsible and wants to be the one to bring Ravage back in. But come on, B, you tried once and you failed. Trying again alone, and by doing so, disobeying orders, It's just not a good idea. It's not smart. And usually, when there's a weird choice that serves a story, I can see why it was made, even if it was not the best way to go about it. In this story, as you'll come to see as we keep going, there is a reason in the story that some Autobots had to go find the Decepticons without, everybody joining them. But they could have done it with the three of them. It would still have worked, I think. I don't know why it's been written this way. It doesn't really make sense, but I don't know. Let's keep going. Prime makes a bit of a leap here. He says B would never be able to track a stealthy Decepticon like Ravage. Except B used infrared earlier to see Ravage, even when he was hiding. And then just a few panels ago, we saw him catching up to Ravage. So Prime's kind of underestimating Bumblebee there, I guess. But also James Hill is contradicting the things that he's setting up in the story. I'm really not trying to just pick on James Hill's writing, but, things are contradicting themselves within pages of each other. It's a bit clumsy and a bit clunky. Prime figures out Ravage's plan. Ravage's powers should have kept him invisible and undetected, so his slip-up in the Ark, which got him caught in the first place, must have been intentional, which, right, that makes sense, and that was the case. He posits that Ravage did all of this to lure as many Autobots to follow him as possible, so that he could lead them to... And then over the page we see Bumblebee run right into a... And Prime finishes the thought he was having over the last page. Decepticon trap. In front of Bumblebee are Ravage, Thundercracker, Rumble, and Frenzy, who are much bigger than they are in the cartoon here. They're shoulder to shoulder with Soundwave, who has Laserbeak perched on his shoulder. And at the very back there, mostly obscured, is Skywarp, I think, from what I can make out. Bumblebee panics and thinks that he has to get out of there, and he starts running away through a narrow canyon pass thing, but Soundwave sends Laserbeak after him, who catches up as Bumblebee exits the rock kind of corridor thing back into the open desert. Laserbeak fires 3 missiles, and B tries to duck and avoid them. He manages not to get hit, but the explosion close by sends him flying, and he lands on his back in the sand. Skywarp is suddenly there now. We didn't see his entrance, but I mean, he is a plane, and he can teleport, so he does have his ways to get there fast. He laughs at Bumblebee and taunts him, saying that the only Autobot who fell for Soundwave's trick was the weakest one, not even worth wasting the energy to deal with. And he looks for a moment like he's about to either lift Bumblebee up or go in for a kiss. He's got his hand on the back of his head, and he's getting in close there. But then he lets go of Bumblebee's head and lets it fall back onto the sand. Bumblebee manages to get to his feet, though, and he retorts to Skywarp's previous comment. You don't think so, huh? He says that despite his size, he can dish out some damage when he's angry, and credit to Bumblebee, he's standing up for himself, and he takes a swing at Skywarp. But Skywarp catches his fist in his hand, and he asks, You dare strike at Skywarp? And he's doing that thing where you put pressure on somebody's wrist and pull it down. So Bumblebee yells, ah! And now he's lower down on the page, like he's kneeling or something in that way that somebody does when they're having that done on them. Though we can't see the rest of his body besides his very upset face and his free hand. Skywarp says that Bumblebee can eat dirt, and it looks like he lumps him on the back of the head. B collapses forward, and he's laid out face down in the sand. But Skywarp continues to taunt him and asks if he understands now. All resistance is futile. Soundwave and Rumble arrive, and Soundwave remarks that he figured that Bumblebee would be no problem for Skywarp, and now they have a hostage they can use as leverage to bargain with the Autobots. The point of view switches to right next to Bumblebee's face, down on the ground, looking up at the circle of Decepticons that are now surrounding him. I thought that was a really neat little detail. We can see Ravage here now too. Soundwave says that he plans to trade Bumblebee's life for Prime's, and B thinks to himself that he can't let that happen. Bumblebee pulls a smart maneuver here, since the Decepticons are all so close around him. When he transforms, he knocks them all back, and while they're all down, B uses that as his chance to escape. The close-by sand dune proves tough to drive up though, and one of the Decepticons catches up to him, asking going somewhere. I think that's supposed to be either Starscream, or it could be Thrust, but Thrust's never appeared in the comics until now, if that is him. And I only worked that out by looking it up, so maybe it's just a weird-looking Starscream? Either way, I don't think anyone references who it is by name, so I can't say for sure. In the Ark, Prime asks Jazz to confirm that Bumblebee has been found, and Jazz says that's correct. Prime says that they need to assume the worst, and Gears tells Prime that the Ark's sensors are picking up a signal, which appears to be an Autobot distress call. Perhaps Bumblebee, only it's airborne and it's getting closer. Prime says, quickly everyone, outside! Jazz wonders aloud what kind of trouble Bumblebee is in this time. It looks like he's about to say something about Bumblebee, but he only gets a couple of words out before he interrupts himself to say, look, up there! And he points a finger up at something. Over the page he says, it's Laserbeak! Someone else asks, then how come the signal we detected was an Autobot signal? But Jazz continues what he was saying, asking, what's he carrying? I think it's a miscolored Prowl there, who says, "He let go! It could be a bomb!" In the next panel, he's colored correctly, and he shouts, "Take cover!" Everyone dives onto the ground, and there's a box that says "but." And everyone has stood back up again, so it looks like a very short amount of time has passed, as everyone realizes that it wasn't a bomb at all. There was no explosion. Prowl suggests that maybe it was a time bomb, and then Laserbeak flies off overhead. And Prime says no bomb. And the last panel reveals that what Laserbeak dropped in front of the Autobots was in fact the severed arm of Bumblebee. That's a strangely adult, gangster movie-esque moment. And of course, since they're robots, it's fine to put this in a quote-unquote kids comic. Never mind that at least twice in the recent past we've had it explicitly stated and confirmed that Transformers can feel pain, but details, right? And that's the end of Crisis of Command Part 2, but we're not done yet. Let's roll right into the third and final part of this story. Prime looks awesome on this first page here. It's a full-page image of him standing in the foreground, and his chest is kind of wider at the top, and then tapers down quite a bit more than I think it normally does to a smaller waist. So he looks kind of like a bodybuilder with giant pecs, and his arms and hands are a touch big too, at least I think so, in this picture. It works super well though, he looks really cool, and that's thanks to the artist on this issue, who is John Stokes, who we've seen a few times before. Script this time is by Mike Collins, colors by Gina Hart, letters by Mike Scott, and editing again this time is Ian Rimmer. Laserbeak is still flying overhead here, and behind Prime we can see Jazz, Hound, Mirage, and between Prime's legs, someone dark blue, I can't place. There's Prowl, and then on the very far right, someone yellow. The only Autobot I know is Bumblebee, and like maybe Sea Spray, but Bumblebee is with the Decepticons right now and he's a hostage, and his arm is laying there on the ground, so in that case, I don't know who this yellow guy is supposed to be. I guess that's an error there, probably. Also, Bumblebee's arm isn't colored quite right either. Laserbeak, who can talk, so it looks like the UK comics are still letting both Laserbeak and Ravage talk. Well, neither can in the US issues at the moment. He tells Prime that if he wants the rest of Bumblebee back, he'll have to come and get him. Alone. Prowl, who is showing himself to be a bit of a violent hothead throughout this story, calls Laserbeak a fluttering junkhead and fires on him, but Prime tells him to hold off. Prowl incredulously asks if Prime is seriously thinking about going with Laserbeak into what is clearly a trap. Mirage suggests they regroup, put together a task force, and then storm the Decepticons. But Prime quickly says no. Laserbeak said that Prime needs to come on his own. This last panel here changes colors suddenly, and it looks like a sunset, which fits as Prime turns his back on the others and walks away, like he's walking into a sunset, and tells the others that this is his responsibility. So finally Prime has something he can do to try and deal with all this guilt that he's been carrying around. The narration says that Prime has let his responsibilities slip too often of late, though it's not super clear if that's informing us of Prime's own thoughts about the situation, or if some, disembodied third party is passing judgment. He remembers back to when the Autobots captured Ravage using a net. After Ravage discovered the internal tensions among the Autobots, and Prime's indecisive and frankly traumatized or post-traumatic state, Ravage escaped, leaving an intentional trail for them to follow. So just some recap here, I guess. It says, through Prime's indecision, Bumblebee chased Ravage. Which is not true at all. Prime did decide to send Mirage and Hound after Ravage, but B decided to just take things into his own hands and did not deliver that message. And even drove past the two of them on his way out of the Ark, without bothering to even mention it to either of them. But it says, Bumblebee's strength didn't match his courage. But even if it had, he went alone into a Decepticon trap and was surrounded. I don't think many, if any, of the Autobots could have done any better than Bumblebee did, really. Prime, once again, blames himself. He should have seen through Ravage's trap earlier, but by the time he did realize what was going on, it was too late. And he also should have known Bumblebee well enough to know that he would do something rash, which I don't think is fair. There was really no way to know Bumblebee would do this. Either way, Prime now feels it's his responsibility to rescue Bumblebee at any cost. And after he's finished remembering and replaying the current state of things, he transforms at the bottom of the page, ready to roll out. Over the page, one of my favorite things in this whole series gets a reappearance. And a new name now. It says, the Decepticon Fortress Sinister. Soundwave is talking to Bumblebee, who has been restrained and strung up on cables or tubes or wires. He says that Laserbeak has told him that Prime accepted the Decepticon terms and is headed their way. He instructs Starscream to ready the welcoming committee, to which he replies, asking if Soundwave really thinks Prime will come alone. Soundwave says yes. Ravage informed him about Prime's indecisiveness lately, and some of the Autobots have caught on that something is wrong with him. They're questioning his judgment. He knows that the Autobots feel a strong sense of duty, especially to one another, and only Prime can make up for his own shortcomings. He's certain that Prime will come alone, as agreed, and when he does, the Decepticons will destroy him. It says here that hours pass and the Decepticons wait, and we can see Rumble and Laserbeak posted outside Fortress Sinister. That's such a ridiculous name, I love it. And in the sky, we can see 2 of the jets patrolling too. Suddenly, Rumble goes into action and starts pummeling the ground, which causes Prime's trailer to start to roll back and into the hole he just created. Far enough that the angle of it actually lifts Prime's main body section off the ground. Rumble asks, "All shook up, Prime?" And Prime pulls the same move as Bumblebee earlier, transforming to get himself out of trouble. The trailer seems to fall into the hole, but the rest of Prime is able to get clear and land face first in the sand. Rumble laughs, saying that the information Ravage delivered was correct. The great Autobot leader is past his prime. Ah, see what he did there? Now, he says, to finish the job. But Prime thinks to himself that if he pretends to be hurt, Rumble will put all of his energy into using his jackhammers again. When he does, that will be Prime's chance to strike at him, while his arms are aimed down and he's busy. Which he does, punching Rumble in the face and knocking him over. A trend in this comic. Not just this story, but pretty much all the time. Someone is being hit and then falls over. It happens so often that I feel like I'm repeating myself too much, but I'm just telling you what happens. With Rumble laid out, Prime notices that he's still shaking, because the jets are coming in low, and there's a shakoom. Thundercracker let out one of his devastating sonic booms, and Prime shouts, "Thundercracker! Ah!" And Skywarp adds, "And don't forget Skywarp." It's like he's his sidekick or something. But he makes a pass at Prime from a distance, firing his laser at him, which clips Prime's shoulder, and he, guess what, falls over. Thundercracker and Skywarp land close by and transform. Thundercracker remarks about how pathetic Prime is, and he's incredulous that this is the Autobot leader. And just then, Starscream comes into land, also in robot form, who says Prime was the Autobot leader, but now he must be waiting to be finished off by, he says, Starscream the leader killer. I wonder if that's a not-so-subtle hint about his plans for trying to seize leadership of the Decepticons, now that Shockwave is, at least for now, out of the picture. Ravage flies back to Fortress Sinister, saying aloud that Soundwave is going to be pleased. Shockwave proclaims that killing Prime now is going to cement his position in the Decepticons as superior to both Megatron and Shockwave. Which is a bold claim, given that he's done nothing here besides show up late and try to, kill steal from Thundercracker and Skywarp by firing the final shot. But nonsensical as the claim is, that totally fits as something Starscream would say or think. Prime remembers his own words from earlier. He is not a warrior by choice, but he realizes that he's about to die at the hands of others who do commit violence by choice. He remembers further back to Cybertron, when Emirate Zaron gave Optimus his rank and title as Prime, telling him that the fate of the Autobots was now in his hands. These memories stir Prime, and he struggles to stand. He's in bad shape, there's a big hole in his chest, and Starscream is shocked enough that he doesn't just cap Prime and get it over with. Instead, he stammers, You are defeated! And Prime says, only in my own mind, no more. The narration says that all Prime's doubts and indecision are now gone, and it says that he sees clearly and that he has a destiny. Thundercracker says, Starscream, do something! But Prime punches out Skywarp, who, yes, falls over, and then Prime turns to Thundercracker, who says aloud that he has no time to charge another sonic blast, and then Prime pops him in the face too. I don't know quite what the other arm is doing there in this panel. It looks like he's thrown it out behind him to also punch Starscream at the same time. And there's this little star-shaped burst to show impact, and then Starscream's face looks absolutely scandalized. His mouth is hanging wide open there. And now Prime has dispatched the others, so he confronts Starscream, saying, Now, leader killer. And now that it's just the two of them, Prime dares Starscream, kill me. And once again, Starscream looks totally shocked, but just for a moment it seems, because in the next panel, he does blast Prime in the chest, in the same spot that we saw he had a gaping hole in earlier. He's stammering, and clearly very nervous, even for all his braggadocio earlier. Starscream tells Prime he's going to destroy him and show him who's the most powerful. Prime takes an almighty swing at Starscream. I really like this moment, because he gave Starscream his shot, right? He let him have the first attack, and he easily withstood it. So now he's playing fair, it's his turn to strike. And this one haymaker to Starscream's face is powerful enough that Starscream's legs both leave the floor before he hits the sand. But not only that, both of his wings break off, and we can see them falling down in the panel. The narrator says that Starscream could never be a leader. He doesn't have the spark of command. Again, they use the word spark here. We've heard it here and there previously as well, though it doesn't mean yet what it will come to mean later. Prime has that spark and more. He was entrusted with the Autobot matrix of creation exactly because he values life more than power. Which is a really lovely thing I'd never considered before about this specific version of the Matrix. Philosophically speaking, Prime stands for creation, while the Decepticons stand for destruction. It's that clear-cut good and altruism versus evil and greed again that's kind of at the core of Transformers, and I think is the secret that appeals to those of us experiencing these stories as adults. I am not a warrior by choice, Prime had said. But, the narrator says, he is a leader. He is what necessity asks of him. Soundwave in the fortress just now receives Laserbeak's report, but Laserbeak incorrectly thinks that Prime was just about to be killed by Starscream and the others, so Soundwave is happy to hear that, while behind him, Bumblebee laments, "Optimus, no!" Soundwave turns to him and says, "Yes!" And that's just the beginning. When the jets get back to Fortress Sinister, they'll regroup and move on the rest of the Autobots. B says, "You will never!" And I like his little speech here, so I'm going to read it. "You have no compassion, no honor, not even amongst yourselves. You can never lead like Optimus." Again, this ties into that kind of philosophical, moral core at the center of these stories. The Decepticons fail, time and time again, exactly because of what B is saying. They're also cutthroat and so power-hungry that they're often self-defeating because one or other of them is trying to screw over someone else on their own side. Soundwave says that Bumblebee's misplaced faith makes him unable to see what is about to happen to Prime. He asks, "Where is your savior now?" But there's a kudoosh as a giant gun falls onto the fortress floor. Bumblebee smiles as Laserbeak and Soundwave turn to see Prime! He's looking badass again here. John Stokes draws an awesome Prime. He's still smoking from his chest wound and he's scuffed up all over, but he says, "I am here, so back off, Soundwave," and he blasts Soundwave in the chest. Laserbeak heads straight for Optimus, but he swings, managing to clock Laserbeak in the face and keeping from colliding with him. And he says, "You too, Birdbrain." B is beaming, and his eyes even look like they're shining. His face is adorable in this panel, like he's so happy to see Prime. And he tells him he knew he couldn't have been beaten so easily. Optimus says B is weak and that the two of them need to get out of there before Soundwave and Laserbeak recover. B tells Prime not to worry about him and instead to take out the Decepticons for good while he has the chance. But Prime argues that getting Bumblebee to safety is the most important thing right now. In part 2, under James Hill, we had Bumblebee wanting to convince Prime not to use the Matrix to take out the Decepticons. Now here, under a different writer admittedly, he's saying the exact opposite. He says, "They're down now, you should bump them off while they're disabled." I think having multiple writers write separate parts of one story is not working out that great for this story. I think it can be done, but they really have to inform each other of what they're doing and, down to the minute details, because this, again, is contradicting itself a little bit. The narration box tells us time passes, and now we're back in the Ark, in the meeting chamber. So I guess the Ark has a conference room? That's cool. Prime tells everyone present that he's carefully considered the arguments about the use of the creation matrix, and that recently he hasn't been his usual self. But he's recovered now, thanks to... Starscream. His interaction with Starscream earlier made him realize that a leader is not someone who just eliminates their opposition. He says a leader has to be more than an engine of destruction, which is a really nice turn of phrase there. I like that a lot. Starscream showed him the ugly face of choosing, basically, destruction over creation, and it's their compassion for humanity that sets the Autobots apart from the Decepticons. For the sake of the humans on Earth, and for the very thing that makes the Autobots more than their enemies, Prime says, "I shall not pervert the Matrix. There will be no dedicated Autobot warriors. That is my decision." And the final caption there says, "It is the order of their leader. There is no questioning it anymore." Which is another beautiful turn of phrase with a double meaning there. There's no questioning the order, and there's no questioning Prime's position as leader of the Autobots. And that's the end for Crisis of Command. All in all, despite kind of a fumble or two, I'd say, in the story, with Bumblebee making a nonsensical choice, this is a really great story. We've had all of Prime's inner turmoil for issues and issues. We see him understandably shaken, questioning his very morality, and even his competence as a leader. But it was that run-in with Starscream that made him see not necessarily who he wants to be, but who he wants not to be, which I can say from personal experience is an extremely valuable lesson. As important as having a good role model is, there is a lot to be learned from having a terrible one too, sometimes. I thought it was really nice too that at the beginning we had the internal strife between the Autobots arguing with each other, which is kind of a mirror to how the Autobots are behaving like the Decepticons. But they come to realize that they need to work together. So in this issue, there's kind of a few ways that the Autobots start to have similar ideas to the Decepticons, and then ultimately Prime pushes them away from that path again. Yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I thought this was really nicely done. And like, just such a stark contrast to the last issue that we read. Like, these comics are so much fun. It's such a roller coaster. You never know where you're going to go or what's going to happen. And there are so many things that have been planted to look forward to. I'm having such a good time reading these. This is so much fun. All that said though, that's all for this week. Thanks as always to my patrons, Mel and Corey, who both kicked me a few bucks this month. If you'd like to help support the show, you can head over to patreon.com/Transformers AutoBook Club. There, you can become an Autobestie or a Decepticon Padre by sponsoring the show for $3 a month minimum, but you can choose however much you want. Everyone who does will get a thank you and a shout out on each episode, and hopefully at some point in the very near future, access to a short monthly bonus episode covering a chapter a month of the Transformers manga. To hear about other comics I've been reading, you can find me on Blue Sky, which is at Clarion Comics JP. Or if you want to chat with me, previous guests, and some listeners too, you can join the Discord using this QR code or the link in the episode description. Giving the show a review on your podcast platform of choice for podcast listeners, or liking the video, sharing the link around with your friends, commenting, and of course subscribing are all ways YouTube viewers can help me out too. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope I'll see you again in the next one. But until then, as always, take care, be kind, and do good. Till all are one.